Hello, good evening. It is February 10th, 2025. My name is Sarah Bryden. I am the chair of the Finance, Operations, and Personnel Committee for the Portland, Maine Board of Education. And we are kicking off our committee meeting this evening. Let's see. So, like I said, I am the chair. Let's see. With us, we have committee member Opperman, committee member Lena, and committee member Noor. We also have board chair Lentz with us. And then we have a number of members of our staff. We have Superintendent Scallon. We have Senior Director of Strategy, Warren. We have Executive Director of HR, Slaybank. We have Head of Secondary Education, Dr. Ahmed. And then we have a number of people in a conference room. So as those folks are part of the meeting, hopefully you folks can also just, give your name and title as you see fit. So we are going to have a really full, informative agenda. And first, I'm going to check and see if there are any participants that might want to give public comment. Let's see. So if anybody who is joining the meeting would like to give public comment, raise your Zoom hand. If we have anybody who's looking to do that, then I will read the parameters for public comment. If there are no folks who are seeking to give public comment, I'm not going to spend meeting time on that. So I'll just give it a minute and see if anybody's going to raise a Zoom hand. All right, I'm going to close public comment. So the agenda that we have ahead of us is a continuation of our last committee meeting. Our last committee meeting had a really good discussion of a few different budget-related topics where staff brought to us information that they had gathered and distilled for us as we, on this committee, work through the process of preparing for the fiscal year 26 budget. So today's meeting is going to as I said, be a continuation of that. We are going to be talking about changes from fiscal year 24 to 25, expanding the Make It Happen program, volunteer corps, and an update on summer school. And all of these things are very specifically tied to the budget process. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to staff so they can shower us with information about all these wonderful topics. And then at the end, committee members, and it looks like Chair Lentz is the board member who's not on the committee who's with us today. We will be holding our questions and comments until the end, and then we will have a really good conversation, I'm sure. So I will now turn it over to Superintendent Scallon to get us started.
Thank you, Chair Bryden. That was a great lead-in and very much appreciated. As you noted, we're going to talk about 4 topics tonight, and we have staff that are prepared to share both around programmatic as well as budget impact on really 3 specific areas, and then one that the committee requested back in October or November, which was sort of a catch-all, which is what I'm going to do at the beginning, which is what changes happened from fiscal year 24, so last year's budget, into this year's budget, and what were the positive pieces that we want to make sure we maintain, what were some of the negative pieces or some of the pieces that had less positive impact that we want to at least be aware of or to consider revisiting. It's worth noting that our fiscal year 25 budget, because of the challenges we faced, we had to make difficult reductions as well as some strategic investments that aligned with our priorities and our new strategic plan. To make sure that we were able to present to you a full and comprehensive assessment of that, we not only looked at the year-to-date impact that these areas are having, and that was captured in a number of ways, including looking at impact so far, along with the strategic plan, student achievement data, but also getting feedback from leaders and from school staff. And so you can see that we got feedback from our leaders, I joined grade band meetings. So the elementary principals and assistant principals, the middle school principals and assistant principals, and the high school assistant principals and principals. I joined each of their meetings and got feedback from them around budget adjustments. And then myself, Carrie Dowdy, who is the president of our teachers union, and Jen Cooper, who is the president of our EdTech union, have been meeting with school staff on a school-by-school basis each Wednesday since about mid-December. And we have, I think it's right to say, 2 schools remaining. And we've had those conversations to get input from staff. And they've really revolved around 2 questions. What changes took place in the budget that positively impacted your school? And what investments would you like to see which could positively impact either the strategic plan, your school overall, and or your own personal longevity in PPS? And that last piece I just want to highlight because one of the things that our strategic plan calls out this year is a real focus around people and making sure that we are collecting data and making sure that Portland Public Schools is a employer of choice and a place where people feel like they can work for the duration of their career. We wanted feedback on that. And I know that folks are going to look at that first question and say, well, why didn't you ask about what negative changes? We did. And we got that feedback loud and clear, and you'll see that in the next several slides. We also knew that that was going to come up in the investments they would like to see. And so I think we got really comprehensive feedback, and I will share that with you as we go through here. So first, it's worth noting that we have 18 schools, if you count Portland Arts Technology High School, as well as Adult Ed. And each school meeting had its own unique feedback and themes. There were also some common themes, and it's those common themes that I've pulled out to share here. So there were 4 positive themes that were identified. The first is a feeling that the increased planning periods at the elementary school were a positive. As a reminder, elementary school teachers saw their planning periods standardized at 5 planning periods for teacher. And this required an investment in specials teachers, art, music, gym, other electives at each school. There were some schools that were already at 5 planning periods, but this standardized it so that all elementary teachers were getting 5 planning periods this year. The second was an investment to ensure that special education coordinators were based at each of the schools. And so as noted here, all schools over 300 students have a school-based special education coordinator. And we have 2 schools that are under 300 students, Presumpscot and Longfellow, and they started the school year sharing a special education coordinator. And then our 2 island schools, Peaks and Cliff, received supports in other ways for that. The third positive change was ensuring that all schools had school culture coordinators. These culture coordinators focus on proactive and reactive school culture, and ensuring that they're in place has been a positive feedback that we've received across the board. It's worth noting that our middle schools had these positions in the past, but they were grant funded. And so we took some of the positive that was happening there, ensured that they were on the local fund or in our consistent budget, and then expanded them so that they're in all elementary, middle, and high schools. And then the last one is around increased mental health supports. And so many of our schools received additional social workers to support students. There were also challenges that were identified as we moved from fiscal year 24 to 25. We did see a reduction in teaching staff at the middle and high schools. These reductions were implemented in varying ways at each of the schools. And so we saw and we see uneven impact. In some cases, the reductions were done based on where staff were already planning to retire. or leave the district. And in other cases, they were done through intentional reductions in force. And so as a result, in some of our schools, particularly at the middle school level, we have teachers that are teaching in 2 content areas. And at the high school level, there's been a question about students having access to fewer electives. The second area that came up was around a reduction in administrative support staff. At the central office, middle and high schools, there were reductions in administrative support staff. Secretaries, for lack of a better term. Our middle schools were reduced by a 0.5 secretary each. And our high schools moved from 4 full-year secretaries to 2 full-year and 1 school-year base secretary at Deering and at Portland. And at Casco Bay, they moved from 2 full-year secretaries to 1 full-year and 1 school year. And then third, and we've heard this feedback at the board meetings as well, is that we had a reduction in the overall number of education technicians. This was partially done to make sure that we were prioritizing education technicians that were focused on special education, but schools are feeling that the reduction in what I'm going to say is general ed or more flexible education technicians has left them with less flexibility at the school level to respond to need. Excuse me. When we asked schools to identify areas for investment, there were a lot of areas that were identified. What you see on the screen are the 7 areas that arose the most. So the first is around having additional staff in classrooms at the K-5 level. The idea here was to provide a second staff member in classrooms that could support with classroom management and small group instruction. The second, to address the reduction in administrative support, was to increase the number of secretarial staff at the high school level. Third is there's really wide variation in the amount of the supply budget at the department and at the classroom level. So this is not just how much money the math department has at a school, but also how much money a classroom teacher is given for room setup. That can vary based on both the priority that the principal places in their budget, as well as if there are supplemental funds provided by a parent-teacher organization. And so there were ideas around standardizing this and also increasing it. The fourth area was around special education programming. This aligns with work that we're doing with district management group and as part of our strategic plan. And it was really calling out the need for both staff and support for special education programming at both the school and the district level. The next was around 9th grade academy and tiered interventions. And so at a broad level, this was around support for targeted student populations and making sure that for students who needed additional academic support, that time was available within the school day and that the resources for that academic programming was also available. The next area is one of trade-off. So dedicated substitutes is an area that was called out. What we're seeing is that our schools really appreciate having dedicated subs in their building and that they would prefer to trade and have less funds in their budget for per diem or daily subs and an increase in a dedicated sub. That's a sub that is hired for their building for the year. And to do that. The reason being, again, that our dedicated subs are there every day. They become part of the school community. And per diem subs, we're having a harder time having them pick up the the position or the fill on a daily basis, even with the higher rates that we're now paying. And then the last area that was a consistent one was to continue to increase staff pay. And this was recognized in our EdTech contract, but also a desire to see that also in our teacher negotiations that are starting off now. And I don't want to say that it was a universal call out for a focus around starting wages, because it was certainly a desire to increase wages for all members of PEA. But in some schools, it was particular focus around starting wages as well. And so that captures the feedback we heard from staff and that we have seen in terms of changes that happened in the budget from 24 to 25, the positive changes, some of the pieces that we knew were going to be tougher this year because of the fiscal challenges we faced going into this year, as well as the suggested areas of investment that our staff shared with us. And so with that, Chair, if I can follow your lead, I'd like to invite Grace Valenzuela to share and talk about two different areas. First is around the potential of expanding Make It Happen. And then second is around the idea of a volunteer corps.
Super, thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Grace Valenzuela. I'm the Executive Director of Communications and Community Partnership for the district. And I am here to present about two programs, and I'll start first with Make It Happen. And with me are, staff members who work in the two programs that I am going to present, Nala Lisa and Corey Anthony and Colby Sr. So, okay. So they'll chime in if I need help. So our agenda, so we're talking about Make It Happen, who does it serve, and why and how the program is designed and how it works in conjunction with existing programs and services, and then some options for consideration and the pros and cons of each option, and the budget implication and what we want to recommend to the board. So just to understand that Make It Happen was launched in 2007, and it is a pilot of the program, and the focus is to address the specific needs and barriers of immigrant and refugee students at the secondary level. These needs identified by multilingual students in a focus group conducted before the conception of the program take into account the real barriers underserved multilingual learners typically come up against, such as lack of access to rigorous courses, low expectations from school staff, limited social capital, unfamiliarity with the U.S. educational system, challenges in developing competitive college profile, internalized racism, discrimination, U.S. resettlement transitions, etc. So Make It Happen is designed a more seamless program across the board that considers the academic, social, and emotional development of students and incorporates systems of support to bring about educational justice. The program was recognized by the National School Board Association in 2021 as a Magna Award recipient for equity. So we currently serve 600 multilingual students, and multilingual students in our definition are defined broadly as students with a primary home language other than English. So it is not the new definition of English language learners, because right now English language learners are called multilingual learners. So there is a confusion around that. So we're focusing on all students who we can serve students whose primary home language is other than English. So and the program is aligned with the district strategic plan and specifically focus on the equity 2.2, expand opportunities and improve systems that accelerate outcomes from our historically underserved students and families. And 4, expand and strengthen programs that accelerate outcomes for and develop multilingual learners. Our personalized and structured support includes transitional preparation from middle to high school and high school to post-secondary institutions, academic coaching, college application, assistance in accessing standardized test preparation classes, college visits, instruction, and support in crafting college essays, outreach to families and parents in their home language, civic engagement, and leadership development. We encourage students to take challenging classes, participate in workshops to improve their standardized test scores, join co-curricular activities, and engage in leadership activities at the school level. Join some community service and also career readiness opportunities to help them create competitive academic profiles for college admission. And honestly, we take advantage of the immigrant drive to succeed, which is typical among first and second generation immigrants, according to research. And we bring in the community into the work by engaging with volunteer academic coaches whose own worldview gets expanded, and the relationships built with our students also strengthen their positive reception of newcomers, which, according to research, is critical to immigrant success. As noted previously, the community of newcomers and first-generation students have a shared set of needs and core stressors that are unique to them: acculturation, isolation, and trauma. MIH's approach and entire program development is based in acknowledging the talents and gifts of our students and their aspirations and their goals, at the same time working to alleviate stressors. In the multi-tiered system of supports for all students, Tier 1 is the base program that all students receive through high-quality instructional materials delivered with fidelity by certified educators. Make It Happen works with students in all 3 tiers, depending on the grade band, school, and individual need, and our program's focus is on Tier 2. Based on specific needs of students, targeted interventions are provided for them in Tier 2. Tier 3 is for students with intensive program needs, and Make It Happen serves in all tiers of support, but our Tier 2 is our focus. We work in conjunction with our staff in existing programs of support for all students in instruction, teachers, guidance counselors, social workers, and coaches in the school. We have many successful alumni, and one of them shared this perspective. I joined Make It Happen right after I arrived at Deering. I was an immigrant, and I didn't know anything about the educational system in America, but with the help of Make It Happen, I was able to adapt to school and apply to college. That's how amazing that program was to me. In response to the board query to explore expansion of the program, we are offering 2 options. Option 1, enhance current programming with the same profile of students and the same staffing level. And Option 2, expanding Make It Happen to serve non-multilingual students and from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. And I'll take it up one by one to talk about the pros and cons and the budget implications of each option. So, Option 1, enhancing existing program and maintaining current staffing levels. Our multilingual students display needs in achievement, attendance, and behavior, which we designed a program to address. We want to strengthen this program, recognizing that 83% of the district's multilingual students are also economically disadvantaged. There are many ways to enhance our program. One of them is to provide support to middle school students as they transition to challenging freshman year. We also want to enhance our AmeriCorps and volunteer base. Some of the pros that we can contribute in decreasing the achievement gaps between ML and non-ML students, provide support for students who need to exit from ELL designation, and strengthen middle school students' sense of self and academic preparation for high school transition. Consistency in programming goals and strategies that are proven to be best practices in serving multilingual students from immigrant family backgrounds also has its advantages. The option in this option, it adds 0 to the budget line. We will strengthen our volunteer outreach to find partners who can provide students with one-on-one or small group academic coaching. We will continue our work with AmeriCorps in providing direct service to students for tutorials, homework help, college application, and typically when we have AmeriCorps volunteer that work 40 hours in a 12-month contract for us, that cost is about $7,000. Option 2, and it is looking at expanding to serve economically disadvantaged students who are non-multilingual, not English speakers. These students have stressors, but they are largely different from those who are recent arrivals. According to the National Institute of Health, their stressors include generational poverty, disenfranchisement with public education, minimal parental education and or success with the system, and lack of language development before age 6, difficulty with thinking, with thinking and feelings of hopelessness. So given these characteristics, we need to provide the students services that address the specific needs and circumstances that's requiring this restructuring of the current program. The cons seem to outweigh the pros in this option, including higher costs and program revision. So it does not really, the duplication of services is already something that services that the schools already provide, and increased costs in staffing. So these are some of the existing programs and supports for our educationally disadvantaged native English speakers, and advisory teachers as point of contact in building relationship. We have learning centers, study hall. There are guidance counselors that support students in coursework, jobs and colleges, and social workers. We have McKinney-Vento Street Academy, and we also have culture and climate coordinators, extended learning opportunities, and jobs for Maine graduate classes. So budget 2 implication is to it will increase its costs due to additional staffing for the program. And we're thinking about the cost of startup of a program like this would be at least 2.0 FTE and at a cost of $120,000 of salary, including benefits, not including benefits. Our recommendation is to focus attention and resources to expand within our current programming. and that address priorities related to the strategic plan's achievement, whole student and equity, and services that are targeted and not duplicated within a system that has limited resources. And serving a different group of students requires development of structured interventions, different programming and delivery to meet the specific needs that are the core stressors of this population. And so there are also recruitment goals within the current ML student population that we still have yet to meet. That's the end of the presentation for Make It Happen. So this is the proposal to expand our volunteer corps and create a new system for volunteer management. Just to set us up for background, one of the great things about the city of Portland is its community home feel. And what's attracted me to this place and what has attracted a lot of people coming from different parts of the United States, as well as all over the world. And there's this spirit of neighborly values that have been extended to folks from all kinds of walks of life and from far away, including those from very, very far away. Portland Public Schools has taken advantage of this community involvement. In the late 80s, Portland, the district had a very comprehensive department called Portland Partnership that managed businesses, community, and parent engagement. And each school had a few business partners, and their volunteer corps come from these big, large business organizations. And they had a staff that coordinated volunteer activities at the school level. Over the years, due to budget constraints, staffing for this program was slowly eliminated. And when reviewing this school volunteer management, it is our objective to maintain this strong spirit of community involvement within the budget limitations and constraints. So first, how do other districts manage their volunteers? So we looked at other districts of similar size to us to see how they are managing their volunteers, and there's everything from HR department managing the volunteers at the school level. And there are also some districts that have safety compliance officer to conduct clearances, and adults in schools are cleared. There are some local districts that have volunteer coordinator at each elementary school. And the districts often have community partnerships that are separate from screening and compliance. What do we have? For PPS currently, volunteer recruitment, background checking, and connecting the volunteer with a school-based staff is coordinated by just one staff member, the community outreach specialist. We have over 3,300 approved volunteers at this time. This year alone, we screened 606 new volunteers thus far. They are all in our 18 schools, including Pass and Cliff Island, and they are also at central office at the Multilingual Center. An essential part of recruiting and working with volunteers is to cultivate relationships with organizations, institutions of higher ed, businesses, and individuals in the community. We have the Foster Grandparent Program and Goodwill are our strong partners. Volunteer management is only one component of the community outreach current job responsibilities. So the challenges to our current program include the speed in which we can screen and connect volunteers to specific schools and branching out to develop new partnerships. And some of these challenges we could be eased with the addition of working with a centralized database for volunteers or additional staff support. Many school districts utilize a database for managing volunteers. So there are three options we have developed in response to the board query of expanding a volunteer corps to support academic and whole student growth. So first option is to have a comprehensive volunteer management system. And option two is to provide some additional support to schools with their volunteer needs. And option three is to continue with the current system and to strengthen safety measures by utilizing a volunteer database. So option one is to hire three specialists, three elementary specialists, one volunteer specialist at the middle school level and one volunteer specialist at the high school level, all working full-time. So it's a total of five volunteer specialists, and their assignment will be based on student enrollment. They will coordinate with school staff to support and mobilize the current approved volunteers, recruit new ones, and provide training to volunteers. We plan to increase volunteers in schools who are supporting the school's academic goals, as well as enrichment, athletics, and other activities. And the community outreach specialist will become the manager to supervise these volunteers and to develop systems and procedures for recruitment campaigns, developing relationships with community-based organizations, institutes of higher education, businesses, and the public sector. So in a scheme of things, that's the comprehensive one. And in this way, the advantages are that schools can get support from a dedicated volunteer specialist staff. We can also add capacity for the community outreach and volunteer manager to create new partnerships for volunteers, for volunteering data and systems. The cons that we can think of is that it is the most costly of the three options. So with five volunteer specialist positions in a non-bargaining hourly position, this is their pay range, and it's per year, it's about 60,000, not including benefits, and a total of 301,185. And we also will need pay adjustment for the updated position for the community outreach and volunteer manager. Option two is a little bit more scaled down version. We would have one elementary volunteer specialist for the elementary schools and one for secondary, serving the networks, elementary network and secondary network teams. And schools would be chosen to receive extra support based on their greatest need in terms of demographics, number of volunteers, and student enrollment, and school requests. The pros for this are there will have some additional support for the schools and with certain needs, and adding capacity for the community outreach and volunteer management manager. And the challenge for this option is that some schools will not really receive additional volunteer support. So this will be the cost for this option, which is the same structure of, oops, I have an extra digit there, and at $120,000 for 174. Option 3 is to continue the current structure, strengthen our safety measures, and utilize volunteer database. In this option, we are going to keep our current volunteer support with one staff member and subscribe to a volunteer management database. It would streamline the process and allow for schools to be able to better utilize the skills of their volunteers efficiently, and for school staff to access approved volunteers directly with this database. And for us, it will be important also with this option, with the database management. This would also strengthen the safeguards that we have in place. The pros is that we are not going to add additional position to the budget, but we will have an efficient volunteer management system with the aid of a database. And so the cons, as is in the slide there, there's not any more additional support in terms of people, but in terms of systems. There will be limited the capacity to form new partnerships. So in keeping the current structure, we will enhance our efficiency and safeguards using a volunteer database. There'll be no additional staff added, and we will continue to get some support from America Vista for recruitment, volunteer recruitment purposes. And we are going to subscribe to a volunteer database, and in our research, it depends on what how much functionality we can. It could be between $4,000 to $8,000. It's based on the number of volunteers, our enrollment numbers, and what we want it to do. I am recommending to focus attention and resources to strengthen our current system, and to utilize volunteer database for safeguards, volunteer schedule, reporting, task assignments for volunteers. And it will allow us to plan and implement this system that will help future expansion of volunteer services, so that we can align it with the expansion of our community school model that is prioritized in year 3 of the district strategic plan. So each of our community school right now has a full-time community coordinator that does all of this work for those schools. So that's how we can build a really robust system whereby the person is really attached to the school, its goals, and in that community model, it is going to be much better ability for us to move volunteers with this provide schools with volunteers that they need that meet their needs. And I think, and I think that is the end of that presentation.
Okay, so we'll hear about summer school next and then do open questions and discussion, correct? Okay, thank you.
Dr. Ahmed, I put up the slide deck that you and I have.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Atkinson. Good evening, everyone. And Angela and I will be talking about the secondary summer school and elementary summer school programs. So I will start with the secondary one. And at the secondary summer schools, here we will present to you background information, options, and recommendations. So the secondary summer school background information, there are types of programs or summer school programs that take place at the secondary level. And the first one is Summer Bridge, which is a program that helps the incoming ninth graders to transition with the academic skills and the confidence they need to be successful in the high school. So this is an attempt to create a smooth transition for the eighth graders. And the Summer Bridge program last year, the participation was Casco Bay High School had 67 students, Portland High School 28 students, and Deering has 30 students who participated last year in the incoming eighth graders who were going to the high schools. Another program is the Credit Recovery Program, which is designed actually for students who are falling behind and lost credit to just make up work and gain credit and to be on track for graduation. And last year, in this program or with the Credit Recovery Program, Casco Bay has 159 students, Portland 105, and Deering 76 students. The third program is the multilingual program, which is designed to help English language learners improve their skills through continuation of instruction and cultural activities. And last year, for these three programs, the estimated cost was $250,000. And the last one is also extended school year summer program, which is designed for the students with IEPs to create that continuity while there are school breaks. So from the secondary perspective, there is only one option, which is maintaining the summer school funding at the current level to support the existing programs. So this will ensure the summer school funding remain, at this model, the summer school funding will remain the same level, similar to last year's, and continue providing resources to allow students to recover credits, also provide the transition from 8th grade to 9th grade, and also to help our students to be on track for graduation and make up coursework that they miss. The pros, it is some of these programs, is particularly the ESY, is a legal obligation to provide students the continuation of learning. Also, the current summer school programs help stay for some students to stay on track, preventing lack of completion and delay, and also create a smooth transition for the incoming ninth grade students. And some of the disadvantages or cons for this is that the summer school programs were often funded, or in the past were funded through the relief money, and such a federal funding was coming from the funding from the pandemic, and now the district or the local district needs to pick up this cost. And summer school is often optional, and not all students may choose to attend. And also summer school feels like, along the same line, feels an extension of the regular school year for some students. So our recommendation is just to keep the summer school funding at the previous levels, and allocate funding to schools to facilitate these programs effectively. And I'm saying effectively, like more recruitment and increasing efforts to create more participation of whether it is the multilingual program or whether it is the summer breach or the credit recovery. So schools will make more efforts to make sure that participation is in higher level than it is. Thank you. Now, Dr. Atkins Duina will take from here.
Good evening, everyone. So just a little heads up, I do have a presentation on summer programming, but I also talked to Ryan about a little bonus presentation on some support for the K level in language and literacy. So I also have just a brief piece on that. And I did want to start because many of you may remember a time when Portland Public Schools had a more robust summer learning program. And so just want to bring you back to 2013. There was a pretty strong community initiative that focused on summer learning. The Gorman Foundation, Connect Ed, United Way, and others partnered with Portland Public Schools, and provided grant funding, significant grant funding, particularly over 3 years. And so that by 2015, over 10% of students engaged in district summer programming, not including our extended school year or ESY programming for students receiving special education services. So just letting you know that it took significant staff resources and time and resources from outside, but it did build our offerings. Last summer, what we had at the elementary level was a Learning Works summer programming, which we expanded the capacity for with some of the federal grants that Dr. Ahmed referred to. And then we also had a small program at Reiki focused on early literacy that they got with a private grant for their school. So, and the cost for that programming was $130,000 plus in-kind transportation during the summer. And it provided programming for 240 student slots partially through our 21st Century Community Learning Center grant, and then and like I said, we expanded that funding we expanded that programming with additional funds from federal grants, And so we had 100 anyway, so there was 240 total, half funded by our 21st Century Learning Grant and half from additional federal funding. And then the small program for 30 students at Reiki for rising grades 1 and 2 that focused on literacy skills. Options considered for summer 2025. We no longer have the same, we don't have the ESSER funds that we had used last summer to expand our Learning Works summer programming. So what we have now is included is our program with Learning Works that's part of our after school and summer 21st Century Community Learning Center partnership, and that's a grant we get from the state. So we have already, that's what we have the funding for, and this will allow us to fund 120 slots at 6 elementary schools for 6 calendar weeks, and it works out to be about 24 half days. Another option that we have considered, the state usually opens up around this time, the opportunity to apply for a Title I reallocation grant. So there isn't, we have to apply for the funding. It's not necessarily, we don't know that we would win the award, but that funds for that could be used to expand summer programming. Most likely through Learning Works again, because we get the grant so late that it can be really hard to do all the things that you need to do to actually launch a program in the summer once you get notice that you've received the grant. So and I will say, at this point, we are recommending a simplified programming as we build towards the community schools model. And so we are looking at just continuing with Learning Works, not necessarily applying for the grant. We're open to reconsidering that, just with some things that our finance team is dealing with already, looking for a new CFO. We have kind of limited capacity around managing grants already. So adding another grant to the mix would be just another thing that we are considering. We also are in the process of hiring a new person, and I am not sure that they will be ready right off the bat to start to manage an expanded program. So we are already in talks with Learning Works to start preparing for the summer programming for this year. I also want to I have listed some of the context here, which I've already discussed a little bit, that we have reductions in grant funding compared to last year, the limited capacity for grant management. We are in the process of hiring an environmental, experiential, and out-of-school learning coordinator. This was Katie West's position. Katie West has transferred to Paths and is building a new program to build outdoor leadership there. So we're excited for Paths that they get to have Katie's skill, but it does mean that we are looking for another person, and we did slightly revise the position so that it would help add some capacity around summer and out-of-school learning opportunities in general. But we're still, but that person hasn't been hired yet. And then the other thing I would just want to point out that is on our tasks to get ready for summer is that we are still figuring out our special education extended school year programming, and the staff who did this previously are no longer with us and who led those efforts. So that will be a significant effort, just trying to roll out our summer programming obligations that way. And then the next one is about supporting the K transition, the transition to kindergarten and literacy. So The question here that I just wanted to present to you is, how can we provide an even stronger start for our young learners as they transition to kindergarten? Just to give you some current context, we have about 29 kindergarten classes. 34% of the students in those classes are multilingual learners. We also have, whenever we bring students into the kindergarten level, that is a time when special education needs are really in transition from what students might have had under CDS and in the 3 to 5 year range to bringing those plans into the school setting. And it can take some time during the kindergarten year to transition those IEPs. We have also found, and you've read in the news, where CDS is not as often unable to meet the needs of students in that 3 to 5 age range. And so whenever students come into our classrooms in kindergarten, it can be the first time that a child might be identified for needs and services. So we do spend a good deal of time trying to figure out and get those needs met in that kindergarten level. We also have many students who are simply adjusting to the school environment, who have not had school experiences before, and so that environment is new to them. Also, just a reminder that our ratio in kindergarten is 1 to 20 staff members, and at the pre-K level, they are accustomed to 1 to 8 level of programming for a ratio. So whenever we think about what are some opportunities to support kindergarten, we do know that there are benefits at the younger ages of smaller class size and a smaller class size ratio. So just a couple options for adding support. And I'm calling these our kindergarten language and literacy ed techs, because we really do want them to focus on language development and literacy. And so I looked at a couple options to price out for you. At 29 ed techs for 29 classes, we've got over 1.6 million. And that's one option at the high level. I also looked at 13 and a half ed techs for 27 classes, so like a half an ed tech for all classes, except those that are below 15 students. That would mean classes would be sharing an ed tech, they'd have ELA or foundational reading skills at different times during the day to allow an ed tech to go in and support. And so if you looked at that level of funding, it would be about $770,000. Another option is to consider a targeted approach for schools that have a multilingual or economic disadvantage rate of at or above 40%. And if we were to have 8.5 ed techs, again, it's at a half an ed tech for each class at 17 classes at 5 elementary schools. That would bring us to about $485,000. And then the other thing I would add on, just to increase the effectiveness of those ed techs, would be training. The course that we had our teachers take last year in Orton Gillingham reading strategies and methods cost about $1,500, and so we would hope to provide that same training to the ed techs. And I'm going to talk about recommending this option, and I'd love to see us go more for supporting kindergarten, but I also recognize this as a significant investment. And so, and I understand that there are many competing priorities. So I was recommending $484,000 to add 8.5 ed techs and 13,500 in reading intervention PD. And I just want to point out what I see as some of the benefits of this, that it feels like it advances our strategic initiatives in literacy and targeted student support. It's an opportunity to prioritize hiring of multilingual staff to support student, family, and teacher connections across language and culture. If you talk to many of our school leaders and our early childhood educators, there is great value in having somebody in our classrooms who can speak with the child and the family in their home language, especially when they are starting school. And we also see this as a significant investment in supporting the transition to kindergarten for students and for teachers. And I think that's it. So now you have lots to discuss, and appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you so much. Indeed, we do have a lot to discuss. We have, I generally like to try and end meetings timely. 7:30 is 18 minutes away. So if we go a little bit over, I think that's acceptable, but I do want to be mindful of time. And we're going to do what we did last time, which is go backwards. So kindergarten, and then summer elementary, summer secondary, volunteer corps, make it happen, and the 24 to 25 changes. So board member Opperman, let's get started.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. These are really good presentations. They really did a lot of wonderful things for giving us a perspective. And I have 1,000 questions, so I may see some of you at other times because I'll give somebody else a chance to ask a question here or there. On the summer, I've been a proponent of helping the early learners. So I really appreciate the presentation on summer school, however it's done for the kindergarten, increasing kindergarten classroom situations. Related to summer programming, I had a couple things that I wanted to bring up on that, and that is, it looks like in the bridge participation for going into secondary, it's 70% of the Casco Bay kids have some kind of work into the program. I don't know what 28 and 30% are for the other schools.
Board member Opperman, can we start with questions for Dr. Atkinson-Twina and go through?
Sure.
Just so that we don't have to bounce around.
I was just sticking to summer school. I was just sticking to summer school. I guess the questions I had is how many students for in the Learning Works? What is their maximum capacity?
Unless we were to add funding, they would serve 120 students at 6 schools. So it's about 20 students at each site.
Okay, and how are those students selected?
We work with the Learning Works group and our school leaders and the Learning Works team work together. All of the students that are identified have to be students that are not meeting like state standards. So, but as long as we are providing services to students who are not meeting state standards, then there's some there's a broad, that's pretty much it. I mean, we do work with our school leaders, work with the Learning Works team to try and identify the families that they think would work best in that program, because it is limited. It is only a half-day program. Many of our families have communicated to us that they really need a full-day program. So many of them, will often choose like rec or something. So that is one of the downsides of that program.
In working with rec, an interesting thought that I know another community close by has like a Learning Works type program and then pairs up with rec for the rest of the day. Is that a possibility?
And I know of many occasions where we've reached out to try and come and work with REC and partner with them on a model like that. To date, we have not been able to do that.
Do you know, is there any particular reason why? Are they reluctant, or we reluctant, or everybody's reluctant?
I think we would be ready in a heartbeat if REC were able to do that. My understanding from is that I think that they may have some trouble staffing a part-time position to like that.
Okay, thank you. Chair, do you want me to stop?
So we'll come back around for each of the staff members. Yep.
Okay.
Board member Lena, go ahead.
Thank you so much. This isn't really a question, but I just wanted to say that I have worked as a kindergarten support person as a substitute. It's vitally important to have additional hands in the kindergarten classrooms for, things like opening milk cartons, getting a piece of paper, tying shoes. There's just so much happening in a kindergarten classroom. So I would be in support of what Dr. Atkinson-Dwina is recommending, or even a higher level. I think it's really important to focus our attention there.
Any other questions on, you're ready? I know, I understand. Okay. Okay. So Julie, you want to move to secondary summer?
Love to, thanks.
Super.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. We've talked about this different times. I had a question in looking at the summer bridge program. What teachers participate in each of the buildings? I mean, what does Casco Bay do differently than Deering or Portland?
Yes, and this is a good question. When you look at the numbers and the participation, how we ended up with these numbers. So this is a good question. So the approach that Portland and Deering took was to invite the students that they get early warning signs and from the middle school counselors and middle schools, and they invited the students who potentially wanted the head start or the transitions. And Casco Bay took another direction where they invited all of the cohort of the 90 graders, but there was the two different approaches that they took. One is inviting the students with early warning signs or students who needed the support and the transition support, and Casco Bay invited all of their students. So there is two different ways that they took approach.
And who staffs them?
Who staffs them? It is, again, the staff, the budget or the money or the funding that is being asked is paying the staff who volunteers to be part of the summer school support. So, part of the plan is that the ninth grade teachers to be part of this and to facilitate this.
Okay, so and there's more Casco Bay teachers participate, and are they paid from the district or are they paid from grants?
The extra they were paid from the money that is allocated for the summer school.
Okay, so each school can have the same amount of money, they just allocate it and how they choose to do it. Okay, so the costs are the same whether you're doing 67 students or 28 students.
No, the cost is not the same. There are depends on the number of the kids who are taking credit recovery, the number of the kids who are attending the summer school. So
okay, so the bridge, it's just, excuse me for interrupting, just so I clarify, the bridge and the credit recovery get the same amount of money. together? I mean, it's one pot.
So if, for example, if I have a class, 3 teachers who are teaching English credit recovery, and these 3 teachers are getting paid, it's different when another school is getting only 1 teacher or 5 teachers. So it depends on, so the money was not like Portland High School has this money, take it and do, you know, that was not, it was centralized, and Ms. Pamela Tunu was facilitating and taking attendance and students who are attending, so monitoring this program.
So Casco Bay had 159 credit recovery kids plus 67 ninth graders. And so they would be getting more funding for that from all of it from the district than Portland High, using 28 ninth graders and 105 credit recovery, or Deering's 30 plus 76. So I'm just wondering about the design, and the reason I asked about who was doing it is there something different about how they're covered, and how the schools manage that piece. So if you could tell me again at another time. I'm sure other people have questions somewhere else, but those are pieces that seem uneven, to say the least. And so, Sarah, you want to say something? I can see.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that I have a question that I think ties into where you're going, Board Member Opperman. So I remember it was probably a year and a half ago, at least, there was a presentation about the bridge from middle school to high school. And I remember at that point learning about how it's offered to all Casco Bay rising ninth graders and targeted for Deering and Portland. So what one of the things that I jotted down in my notes is there an opportunity to standardize that? I'm assuming that offering that bridge experience to all students at Portland and Deering would be potentially cost prohibitive, or at least it would have a significant budget impact. And I'm curious about whether there would be a budget impact that is meaningful if Casco Bay did a more targeted approach to that bridge program. I don't know, 67 students, I don't know how much we would save by targeting.
That's a good question. And I will be meeting tomorrow with the high school principals. We are talking about the summer school, and one of the recommendations is here I put to empower schools with the necessary funding to tailor and effective. So implementation of the programs. So how to look into grounding this in our student needs and what we see. Mm-hmm. So is it like that summer program where we have the incoming ninth graders who need a little bit of push to boost their Algebra 1 so that they can take accelerated math at the high school? Or is it looking into also programs for the students who struggled in the middle schools to have a better transition? Or is it all of the above? So we will be looking into how looking at the data and looking at effectiveness of the program. So we will. I'll be meeting with the high school principals for that purpose to see the pros and cons of all of these interventions. But we have the skeleton or the basic programs, and we have done it different ways. So to look into it and just to build on the strengths of this, whether it is inviting all Casco Bay students and Portland and Deering students, or whether it's inviting the students whom we need to have specific interventions before they come to the high school. So we'll come up with much more tailored approaches, but we'll build on the strengths that and we'll identify the challenges and we'll go from there.
May I? Yes. I have a follow-up question to that, because you mentioned something that I was going to bring up. And the jump from 8th to 9th grade is huge. But my question is, could it, out of the blue here, a district-wide intervention from 7th to 8th grade, where all of the kids, whether they're going to Casco Bay or going to Portland, have really a real experience, whether it's 2 weeks or whatever, to have them to improve their attitudes and pick up on some maybe basic stuff. Just presenting that as an idea. I'm not expecting anybody to pull out something out of the hat, but I really think, budget-wise, it is a thought for the future to think of where it's more equitably distributed. And I'll be quiet and let somebody else talk.
Any other questions on summer programming for secondary schools? Okay, questions about volunteer corps? I have a couple of questions, but we can start with board member Opperman and then we'll.
No, you start.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, I've got all these notes and things like that, so God love you all.
Julie, can we start with one or two and then see if
Yes, I will.
has the same questions? Yeah.
One, I appreciate Dr. Valenzuela's all of her comments and the group's work at pulling this together. And I completely understand the reason for the choice of the less expensive choice and all. But I do, in the effort of doing that, or again, as you, Grace, evaluate the district, do we know where those volunteers are? Do we know how many of them are long-term volunteers or how many of them are one-shot? I'm going to do a demonstration on, I volunteered and do science demonstration for an hour and a half in my son's class years ago. And I know, and where are those volunteers distributed among, I'd say, with the elementary and middle school groups, perhaps? Any thoughts to be able to tell me that right off the top of your head? Can't hear you. If you.
I'll start, and then I'll see if Colby Senior, who is our volunteer community outreach and specialist, will talk about from her perspective. So we have, as I said, we have over 3,000 volunteers in our system, and it's 3 years. So these are largely, if you signed up, and most of them are parents, you are going to, that approval is good for 3 years. So this, in the system that we have, they're accounted for at school that they choose to volunteer at. And typically, if you have different grades, students in different grade levels, largely they volunteer at the elementary level. So that's where a lot of the volunteers happen, particularly because of the need for the one-time volunteer that you're talking about. It's not like I'm coming regularly to read to a child, but you are accompanying students for a field trip, for instance, or you are making a presentation to a class at one point in time during, to share your expertise, which happens a lot at the secondary level, middle school to high school. But so those are the different, ways of organizing the volunteers. But because we do not have a robust system for accounting for what really skills they can help us with and account for their availability, we are not able to harness the potential of those over 3,000 people in our system. So that is just one of the ways that I can think of. And there was another point to your question. I can't remember now what it is. But.
Well, I was trying to say they're largely in the elementary schools, but if you have long-term tutor type situations,
Yes.
volunteer tutors.
So,
Where are they? And
so
they go for a long time.
those long-term, consistent volunteers are in a program like Make It Happen.
Mhm.
Because it's sort of like they're organized. They have a person who's connecting to make sure it's part of it's inherent in the program to use academic coaches. So they cannot run their programs without them. So they do their best to not just recruit, but make them happy and provide all kinds of support. So, and then enrich the lives of each other, the student and the volunteer. So we very intentional in our work with our volunteers. It's hard to do that at the school level with a teacher who's managing all kinds of also other things. So,
I just brought it up.
and I just want,
Go ahead.
yeah, I just wanted to make sure if there's anything that Colby want to add to my point.
So I would say we do not have the data to say whether a certain volunteer is coming into a classroom multiple times or a single time, because we do not currently have a database system to track that. However, just anecdotally, I could tell you about 2/3 of our volunteers are elementary level, and the majority of our volunteers at the secondary level are going in to Make It Happen or other similar programs where they're doing a consistent tutoring type relationship. We also have programs like a math program at Portland High that does a similar type tutoring. Either that or they're coming in for an ELO, but it's far fewer are coming in for field trips and one-off experiences.
I will stop, but the reason I asked about volunteers and asked for this to come forward is it's those long-term volunteers we need. And in programs in literacy, and it has happened in Portland before, and I'll be quiet so somebody else can speak.
And we do
We have foster grandparents, we forgot. They are there all the time.
Yes, we have foster grandparents and we do have long-term volunteers at the elementary level, but those are often foster grandparents or similar where they're more classroom embedded, often like a parent or someone who's coming in, every Tuesday they come into reading time, something like that, where they're already connected with the school, or if they're a community member like a foster grandparent, they're coming in through a program. And having that long-term relationship, but it's not a one-on-one tutoring like at the secondary level. It's more classroom general support.
Okay, thank you.
Board Chair Lenz, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I think just, in thinking about whether or not this is something we want to intensify or grow, I think it is really important that anything that we try to grow, is really we are grounding in data. And I know that there's limitations because we don't have a bigger database, but even understanding from schools, what is the need within a school, within each of our schools for volunteers, I think could give us some good information, because are we trying to solve a problem at a scale that we don't actually have? I don't know the answer to that question. And I also think that, I know that volunteers can be incredibly helpful. And people that are able to volunteer typically have a set of advantages that other folks don't have, that is not going to help us in trying to create a more racially and ethnically and socioeconomically diverse environments for our young people. And when we're bringing in volunteers, they don't get the same kinds of training that our educators get. And so I think we just need to be really mindful about what is the appropriate place for volunteers within our school and not. So I, as board chair, I'm not on this committee. I'm not going to be voting for your first round of your budget. But to me, this isn't a place that feels like it's been kind of explored enough to be putting resources in at this stage of the game.
Thank you, board chair. So in somewhat of the same vein, in terms of, your comment about not having enough data, I think that from a budget perspective, the option 1 and option 2 with the salary figure, it would have been really helpful for me to see that with benefits instead of without benefits, and an actual dollar amount on the pay adjustment for the existing folks, in terms of, trying to make budget decisions. That seemed like some question marks that were a little confusing to me. But yeah, I also am noting that it's 7:36, so let's move on to questions around Make It Happen. And fiscal year 24 to 25 adjustments. Board Chair, let's go ahead.
Sorry, did we skip Make It Happen already?
No, I
Gotta get the hand button.
Yes.
Again, like I love Make It Happen. I love hearing from students what that space feels like for them. And if we were to have money to invest in a database or something to collect information, that's where I would want to put it, because I really want to be able to talk so clearly about the impact of this program for students. It's obvious that it's doing something really great, but let's get super clear what it is so that we can grow it smartly.
Board Chair Lentz, do you also have questions about fiscal year 24-25?
Can I just real quick,
Yes.
Chair, can I treat Chair Lentz's question as not rhetorical or a suggestion, but just a point to highlight that Power School, which is our new data system that is coming online in April, should allow us to flag students that participate in targeted and specific programs and to be able to see the impact that program has relative to another student who does not participate. And so I think that, Chair, if what I'm hearing from you is sort of a charge to have Make It Happen be one of the first areas where we really use the power of that tool to look at the impact of Make It Happen. And so just take that as encouragement to use the new tool when it comes online in April as intended.
Super. Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
And to back up the concept on it, knowing what it does, what Make It Happen does for the individuals. And I'm particularly concerned not of the social, emotional, and also the academic improvements, see where the data comes out. And what aspect of that could go then to another group of individuals that may, even though there is the system out there, it's not working for them. Just because they're not, they don't have to be in the Make It Happen program, but maybe they need a program of its own and separate that needs to be developed. But it'll be good to see what Make It Happen has. And I'll let Maya.
Board Member Lena.
Yes.
Okay, my question was, there was a mention of the staff sharing that they would like to have additional staff in the K-5 classrooms. And so I was wondering how this might look in terms of adding staff. I know we talked about adding staff to the kindergarten classrooms, but beyond that, were there specific ideas given by staff members, or have you come up with ideas of how that could look?
I mean, kindergarten and the presentation that Angela shared was an early way to pilot an opportunity to expand it. The other thing that we've talked about is being really strategic about the placement of special education, ed tech, and ESOL staff, and looking at what their schedule is. It can be cost prohibitive if we don't do this really strategically and in a gradual way. And so that's where, just in response to the statements from staff, we wanted to add in that piece that Angela shared this evening.
I had two. Board Member.
No, go.
Please, Board Member Opperman, go ahead. You might be asking what I was going to ask anyway.
Okay. Related to what Member Lena said. In talking about additional staff in K-5 or class size, which is what Dr. Duina was talking about, it has in both in elementary school and also in middle school and high school, where has there been any creative thought of how to shift staff to make a greater impact? For example, some anecdotal thing that at Talbot School, there was 2 teachers that shared their 2 classes, so that in that area, they end up with more people in the room at different times. And therefore, if they're sharing an ed tech, it's becomes more efficient, but the class is bigger. And I know at the middle school, the big discussion is of having to teach, 2 different topics and of all that sort. Has there been any thought of restructuring such that you have more teachers are teaching their specialty and really working with students in their specialty and maximizing, because on Wednesday, my question is going to be, okay, how are things going? And what's happening? Things don't seem to be improving, and how can we make it improving? So when you're talking about additional staff or, interventions, 9th grade academy and tiered interventions, and I think as a teacher, I know we had a wonderful person who did math science intervention in the high school, so that when I had a kid who was stuck, and I've worked, and they couldn't work with me in my time when I was free, they could go to that person and get help. And when I see tier 2, either at middle school and high school, that's what I'm mentally thinking of. I don't know that's what everybody else was thinking, but that's what I'm thinking. So those are statements, I guess, more than questions. And go ahead. I'll let you speak.
I heard a little bit of inflection at one point during it, so I'm going to take it as a question, which is there's been discussion around a number of options that have been talked about sort of informally with staff, and staff have had a number of ideas about ways to get creative on staffing. So I had a conversation with some staff who talked about sharing an ed tech between 2 classrooms. And so 2 teachers and an ed tech would sort of make a team at the elementary level, and that would provide some flexibility and some go-between. And there would be more of an ability to move students back and forth within those rooms for small group instruction that would be targeted and leveled at certain points, right? So that's one example at the elementary level that was discussed. At the middle school level, and I don't believe this is going to be discussed on Wednesday, but one of the ideas that has been talked about is about leveraging teachers in their core content to provide some targeted tier 2 intervention during some of their planning time. So at the middle school level, teachers right now have 10 planning periods a week. 5 of them is their individual planning, 5 of them is their team, sort of at like the most oversimplified level, right? I know it's more nuanced than that. And one of the ideas is to use a couple of those planning periods for teachers to pull small group on a consistent basis to provide targeted support. And so a way to leverage that. The other piece is just as we go through schedule changes, the RIF process last year was new for school leaders and folks to go through. And so there's a little bit of course correction that they can do now around licensure and sort of adjusting as appropriate now to make sure that we have people teaching in their core areas. But I do think there are conversations that are happening. And one of the things as we go through this budget process we need to do is give school leaders some bounded autonomy and flexibility to make some logical adjustments. Even just the proposal of adding additional staff at the kindergarten level. Perhaps there's a floor, right, that a class of 13 kids doesn't get a second staff member, but one of 18 does. That type of idea. And school leaders may have some flexibility to adjust based on that.
Thanks.
Super. So my one remaining question about that first topic that we covered has to do with the dedicated substitutes, the idea of having more dedicated substitutes and fewer per diems. I'm interested in better understanding, let's say you have the dedicated substitute showing up every school day and the entire school staff shows up as well. Can that person be repurposed in the same way that an ed tech could be repurposed in various classrooms?
Yes. So the advantage is that you have somebody that's part of your school community, and that on a day when everybody's there, right, they're there in the community, and they'll take on other responsibilities or help in a classroom, right? They're not sitting on their hands. These are part of the school community. The disadvantage, if you look at it purely from a dollars and cents, is that that's a day when you have subs in your building that you wouldn't otherwise need them. It's a very limited time where that is actually the case. And so the trade-off is that you have 2-3 people who really know your school that are there every day versus trying to capture subs on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. So there also might be some efficiency around not having to find a substitute every single day when somebody calls out.
Yes.
Dr. Opperman really likes that idea.
Yes.
And I think not just efficiency, but also just the reality that anybody will tell you that's been a teacher or worked in education that having a sub is hard. And having a sub that knows your school community, knows expectations, is hard. And so having somebody that's there every day makes it a lot easier. Yep. And so there's efficiency from the principal end to somebody who's joining a grade team, but knows all the teachers on that team, knows your culture coordinator, knows your SPED coordinator, knows who to reach out to if they need support. There's better consistency for the educational program for the students.
Can I also just add that they really have served a pipeline function in a number of our schools. So they take on our long-term sub positions, cover leaves, they become teachers, and that I think, that is really an important function for those positions. So,
Absolutely. It just also the days that you never couldn't even get any sub in the building and a teacher has to cover another teacher's class. That's disaster as far as I'm concerned. So.
All right. A lot of ground covered. Thank you for your patience. We are over by about 18 minutes. And I just want to make one short little brief comment before I look for a motion to adjourn. Grace, did you have a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to respond to somebody's question about data. And so we have something that I forgot to mention or didn't put in the slide that we asked for data from the data team. So the average GPA of our students in the high school level is 85. And for Make It Happen, it's 88. And then the other one that we have data on is students who take honors and AP classes. That's 56% of student 10th to 12th graders in the district. And for our students, there's 65% in Make It Happen. Those are the two things that I have.
Great.
Okay. That is great data to hear. So what I was actually going to say is that I appreciate everybody, an additional 20 minutes beyond the schedule. I appreciate all of the time, energy, and effort that went into all the presentations. I would also just say, because all of these things are so important, and I know everybody on the team really wants to move things forward and make progress, I would just ask that we try to put our best foot forward, proofread slides, maybe do a trial run of your technology before we are in a public meeting, because I want to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward to each other and to the community so we can do the important work that we need to do together. With that, I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn. Board Member Lena, thank you. And a second from Board Member Opperman, and show of hands from members of the committee. We are adjourned. Thank you so much. Have a good evening, everybody.